Against the backdrop of the gently lapping waves, the beach in this resort town always seemed like a safe haven from reality. The soft light of the setting sun played on the water, casting deep, warm hues as if nature itself was trying to hide the shadows that inevitably followed everyone who came here. But the shadows inside people could not be hidden so easily, and Marina knew this. She stood at the shore, gazing at the horizon while her thoughts wandered between the past and the present, trying to find answers to the questions that had been plaguing her over the past few days. She and Andri had been married for 10 years. Their marriage had always seemed solid, like the rocks on this beach, embedded in the sand and resisting the constant pounding of the waves. But something had changed recently, and Marina sensed it on a deep, intuitive level. This trip to the sea was supposed to be their attempt to regain something long lost, to fill the emotional gaps that had grown between them. Yet, at the same time, inside her grew a fear that this trip might instead put an end to their relationship. She glanced back at the hotel, where Andri had stayed behind in their room under the pretext of being tired. Over the past few days, he had become increasingly withdrawn, retreating into himself and distancing himself from her, even during simple conversations. His touch was rare, like the sparse drops of rain in a desert, and Marina could feel it, the coldness, the emptiness. At times, she felt an overwhelming urge to explode, to voice all the accumulated dissatisfaction from these years, but something held her back. She was afraid of the answers she might hear. The next day, Marina went for a morning walk along the shore. Her steps were measured, almost meditative. Inside her, a strange conflict was taking place. On the one hand, she tried to convince herself that her anxieties were unfounded, that she and Andri were simply going through a rough patch that would eventually pass. But another part of her soul persistently whispered about possible betrayals. On this shore, there were too many people like her, people trying to escape their problems in the silence and solitude. And although she sought clarity, her thoughts were as tangled as the waves that endlessly crashed against the shore, never finding peace. Her attention was drawn to a couple sitting further down the beach. A man and a woman, clearly engrossed in each other, sat so close that it seemed there was no air between them. Marina's gaze lingered on them a moment longer than she would have liked. At one point, the woman turned around, their eyes met, and Marina felt a strange sense of déjà vu, as if they had seen each other before. Something about this woman's appearance was too familiar, but Marina couldn't remember where or when. Anxiety began to rise within her. Returning to the hotel, Marina decided to have a quiet evening to herself. She poured a glass of wine when Andri's phone, lying on the bedside table, buzzed. Normally, she didn't touch his things, respecting his personal space, but now her curiosity overpowered her principles. One message lit up on the screen: short but significant. When will we see each other again? Her heart stopped. Marina felt a cold wave rise inside her, and she could barely make herself breathe. Questions flooded her mind, but there was no answer. She sat on the edge of the bed, not knowing what to do. Was this just her imagination, or was she on the verge of something inevitable? Marina stared at the phone screen for a long time, unable to take her eyes off the message. It felt like her world was starting to collapse. Inside, everything was mixed: fear, hurt, anger. This was the first real confirmation of her worst suspicions, but until now, she had refused to believe that her intuition was right. Everything in her body felt numb, while her mind frantically tried to come up with excuses. Maybe it was just a friend, maybe a colleague, maybe, but the voice inside her was unwavering. This wasn't just a friend. Marina decided not to respond to the message, not to confront him right away. For the first time in a long while, she realized she needed to take a pause and think. She placed Andri's phone back on the bedside table and stepped out onto the balcony. The night air was fresh, but even that coldn't relieved the tension building up in her body. In the distance, the lights of other hotels twinkled, and the muted sound of the sea could be heard. But inside her, there was complete silence. Her thoughts about meeting that woman on the beach wouldn't leave her. Something about her eyes was too familiar, as if they had met before. Could she be the very woman Andri was texting? Marina's heart ached at the thought. The next morning, Marina decided she couldn't just sit and watch as everything fell apart. She needed answers. Andri, as usual, said he was going to the gym and might meet some friends on the beach. He hugged her before leaving, but his touch felt fake, devoid of the sincerity that once connected them. When the door closed behind him, Marina felt a sharp pain in her chest. She didn't want to be the kind of woman who spies on her husband, but now this was a matter of survival for their marriage or her own stability. Marina decided to follow him, keeping her distance. If he went to the beach, she could confirm whether her suspicions were justified. Following Andrew from a small distance, Marina felt adrenaline coursing through her body. Her steps were cautious so as not to attract his attention, although she knew that if he noticed her, it would be hard to explain her behavior. There were many people on the beach, which worked in her favor. Andrew walked along the promenade and turned into a small cafe by the sea. Marina sat at a table a bit farther away, holding a menu in her hands, trying to pretend she was just waiting for her order. But her eyes were glued to him, like a magnet. Several minutes passed before the same woman from the beach entered the cafe. Marina watched as she headed straight for Andrew and sat down across from him. They exchanged smiles, and her heart sank, as if someone had pulled the rug out from under her. They talked, left, looked too close, too absorbed in each other to call this an innocent meeting. Marina suddenly realized that, at this moment, she was witnessing the reality she had been trying to escape all this time. It was too obvious, too real a proof that her world was crumbling. At some point, her gaze met the woman's eyes. It was only a second, but she felt a chill run through her body. The woman raised her eyebrows in surprise but quickly looked away as if nothing had happened. Andrew, fortunately, didn't notice this exchange of looks. He was too engaged in the conversation. Marina felt her knees trembling. She couldn't stay there any longer. Rising from her seat, she hurried out of the cafe, barely restraining herself from running. Once outside, she took a deep breath. But her head was still spinning from the emotional overload. The pain inside had grown so intense that she almost physically felt something tearing apart within her. Marina didn't know what to do next. She wasn't ready to confront this reality, even though she had intuitively known about it for a long time. But now what? How could she return to their shared room and pretend that nothing had happened? And could she even begin to understand why this had happened? She didn't have answers to these questions, but she knew one thing: this day would change her life forever. Returning to the room, Marina sat on the bed and sat in silence for a long time. Her thoughts wandered between wanting to confront Andrew directly and the fear of hearing the truth. Time passed slowly, as if it wanted to delay the moment of inevitable confrontation. When Andrew returned, he looked as if nothing had happened. His face was relaxed, his voice casual. He asked how her day went, and she mumbled something vague in response. But inside her, a decision was forming. She knew she could no longer live with this lie. That night, Marina didn't sleep. Her mind replayed all the possible scenarios of what would happen next. She couldn't just turn a blind eye to this, but she also couldn't let her emotions destroy her. Tomorrow, they would have to talk. But what she would say, and what he would answer remained a big question. One thing was clear: her life would never be the same.